Hi, everyone. Welcome to the second round of our systems thinking chats. So here we get together with different social impact leaders from the Philippines and just have very open conversations with them about how they are trying to incorporate systems thinking in their work. So for this round, we're focusing on migration and systems thinking. And I had a chance to chat with Miss Cristina Liamzon. Tina and her husband Edgar are co-founders of a really fascinating and mostly volunteer-run program called ALSE. And they've been able to support over 4,500 overseas Filipino migrants and their families across 16 different countries. And their program is a holistic one that incorporates leadership, social entrepreneurship, and financial literacy. So in the first video, we'll be listening to Tina's story and she'll be sharing how the ALSE program began. In the second video, she'll be sharing more about how and why they decided to try and integrate systems thinking in their work. And in the final video, she'll be reflecting on migration as a systemic issue. So I hope you enjoy these videos and thanks for watching. Bye.
So my name is Tina Liamzon, and while I'm now based in Manila for the past maybe 10 years, I've lived maybe all of 26, 27 years outside of the Philippines, and the longest being in Rome, Italy, where I lived since 1990 up to 2011. And living in Italy, where there are so many Filipinos, really it's through the interaction with so many Filipinos in the course of so many years that I lived in Italy that I got really involved in migration. And it started out seeing the different problems and challenges that many of our OFWs or our migrants, most of whom work as household service workers or as domestics or caregivers or caretakers in Italian families or maybe expats, realized that these challenges in many ways had solutions if collectively they could be addressed. I saw how many of our migrants would get so indebted, and despite the high salaries that they would receive, even as domestics or caregivers, um, they're really not able to save substantially, at least in the stories that they would tell, and not invest because so difficult for them to say no to family requests, even if the requests may be more along the lines of wants rather than needs, meaning they just want the latest computer, the latest phone, the latest gadgets, or maybe unreasonable types of wishes. But then many of their OFW parents or relatives would give in, sometimes out of a sense of guilt that they're not able to be with their loved ones, and their presence so badly missed, and that's how they make up for it. So what happens at times is they are able to do this, provide for whatever is asked by even borrowing sometimes or working double time, or at the cost of not being able to save because they send everything back to the Philippines. So there's no real kind of financial plan. We thought that by giving seminars of sorts where people could learn a little bit more about budgeting, saving, how to invest, that they could sort of plan for their stay, and then hopefully save enough, invest enough so that they could actually return back to the Philippines earlier than maybe originally planned, because so many of our migrants, migrant workers, have that plan that they won't stay very long, and yet they end up staying so long. So over the course of living there for 26 years, we've met so many of our OFWs saying, oh, they only stay for 5 years, save enough to be able to send their kids to college or save enough to buy a house, set up a business. But many of them end up staying longer and longer. And therefore, the distance from the family becomes longer and longer too. But out of those financial literacy seminars, which we give for a few hours, people would get interested, but there was no real substantial kind of change in the mindset or in the lifestyle, really in the behavior, in the financial behavior. So it's people see the need for it, but really don't take the necessary steps to be able to actually do something concrete, about it. We also saw that a lot of the problems were not just financial, they're all related, the psychosocial needs of our migrants, meaning, problems among partners, spouses, problems of parents and children, and not because of the long distance, or even if the children would have reunited with their families, because Italian law allows reunification of families, but because they were not able to grow up with their parents' kind of supervision, so they end up having really a distance. No, they don't feel that their parents are their parents. They can't call them nane or tatay, and that's, in my interviews with some of the kids, because we also did a study on the children who were brought back to Italy and what their situation was. We realized that the psychosocial challenges were not really addressed sufficiently, in terms of maybe even before the migrants would leave, but also during the time that there's separation, because there's a lot of talk about the psychosocial issues, but I don't think there's enough really moves to address. Their church groups of different denominations are trying to do their own thing, but I don't think there's sufficient kind of preparation of those who would be doing counseling, or NGOs, CSOs, the government to some extent, because they've had to. But I think we need to look at these issues in terms of a more whole of society approach, where it could be the community sort of taking care of, as a community, not just a family member who's given that authority or the responsibility by the migrant to take care of the family or the children left behind, which is a very difficult task, no? Because you're not the actual parent, you're the surrogate, and maybe the authority is not really with them, or maybe if it's grandparents, they're getting too old to be able to really supervise their kids enough. So things like really has to be community. It takes a village to raise a child. To educate a child, it takes a village to raise a child. But that kind of mentality has to also seep in. So that ended up with my doing a small research on the situation of Filipino youth in Rome. Because of all these stories, I take time during Sundays when everybody would have their day off and going to church to just chat with people who are willing to chat about their problems, and very many had no hesitation. They wanted to be able to share their stories, the difficulties they experience with spouses, many of whom, they end up separating, or with children, that, their heart aches, that despite all the money that they send, that the children don't quite appreciate. And so, from that, I said, it's good to find out what's really happening. And then the children who were brought back, they were starting to drop out of school, getting into drugs, getting into early sex and unwanted pregnancy. So ending up getting married very early, because parents would literally force them to get married even at a very young age, when they didn't even know their own selves. They're finding their own selves, their own identities. So as a result of that study we did in 2005, with the embassy, with the church, and with the communities, we sort of presented this to them and said, what can we do to it together? Let's not make this a study that's just going to end up somewhere, people talk about, but nothing concrete. And so that's how we sort of evolved a program that we started to call Leadership and Social Entrepreneurship Program. Then we added the word Ateneo, so now it's called ALSE, that would provide training on the three basic things that we thought would be very good for any migrant, especially the young migrants in Italy, in Rome. So on leadership, because we felt that we wanted to target the youth, but let's say in terms of building up and strengthening whatever leadership skills that they had. And then on financial literacy, personal financial management, because they still needed to deal with that. And then social entrepreneurship, so that we heard many stories of people wanting to set up businesses, so that for their families and for themselves so that they can start going home, but don't quite know how. Anyway, those were the three major concerns, and it became like from a pilot of 1 year, one session every month for 12 sessions. Given it became an Ateneo executive education program under the Ateneo School of Government. We were able to negotiate this with the then dean of ASOG, Tony Lavinia, and he was very happy, glad to help. Said, okay, organize the migrant trainees, and Ateneo would send resource persons. So it became like a partnership with our NGO called OSPES and ASOG, which eventually became a consortium, adding a few other agencies, Ugat Foundation and SEDPI. So in a way, that became my story of how I became involved in migration in a much more what do you call this, action oriented program. In 2008, after two years of planning it out, we finally launched it. Got 51 participants to actually sort of pilot it with us, because we were very hesitant. We didn't know how to turn out, because everybody was telling us, including our embassy colleagues, that to be prepared that by the end of the 12-month program, we would not have too many trainees left, because they would have all dropped out. Because keeping migrants interested and willing to stay 6 to 7 hours every Sunday that we had the session. So that was only once a month, but still for those 12 Sundays was asking a lot. That's what they told us. So, we said, let's try it, because it's not something that we will know if works unless we try it, right? So we're very glad that it did, because from the 51, 37 graduated after 1 year. And so that became the pilot. And from Rome, we expanded to 5 other cities in Italy. And now we're in 16 countries in Asia, Europe, and the Middle East and North Africa. And we're very happy that we continue to expand even during the lockdown. But, we will expand to North America and to Russia and Germany in this next few months. So, of course, there are 10 million overseas Filipinos all over the world, 200 territories. And we've graduated maybe 4,500, including the Philippines graduates. And so what is this in the light of 10 million migrants? But we believe that we do it one migrant worker at a time, and then hopefully that migrant worker graduate, OF graduate, will be able to share whatever he or she has learned and pass it on, paying forward, giving back. And we challenge all of them to become change makers, that they contribute not just to their own and to their families' well-being, but definitely to the community, even in the host country, as well as, of course, back in the Philippines, and to society. So that's been our mantra.